to introduce themselves. So first I'll hand over to Vinesh.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Katie. Good evening, everybody. My name is Vinesh Mistry. I'm a junior barrister at DWF Advocacy. I have a very busy court practice, especially right now, remarkably, in civil and commercial litigation. And I also have the benefit of being an employed barrister. So I see the profession from a slightly different angle relative to other members of the bar.
Brilliant, thank you. Have we still not got Lawrence, Gabrielle?
Sadly not. I don't think I can see him, but I will drop him a message. So if we just move on.
Brilliant. So Robert?
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Rob Hanna. I'm the founder and managing director of Kasum Carr, which is a legal recruitment firm that supports lawyers, barristers with career moves. I also host the Legally Speaking podcast, which is one of the world's leading legal podcasts, where we air across 80 countries and 800 cities, believe it or not. And we have a whole host of interesting guests from barristers, lawyers, entrepreneurs and the like. So yeah, that's very much about me.
Thank you, Robert. Lawrence has just joined. So Lawrence, we're just doing a quick introduction, telling everyone who you are, what you do, if you don't mind.
Hello there. First of all, apologies for being late. Work, I'm not going to say any more than that, but I'm here. Hello, I'm Lawrence. I'm a barrister. I was called in '95 and I've been practicing in London and London only, pupillage in London as well. And in 2003, for reasons I will not trouble you with today, I started my own set of chambers with another gentleman in the Temple, and that was some 17 years ago, and we practice now in commercial work mainly in London and for some big multinationals. Why am I here tonight? To hopefully assist you. Please ask me what you wish about job applications and making your way in the legal profession. One of the roles I've played since 2003 is working on recruitment and how to actually strategize over applications, who are the people that we're going to invite to come in the door. And that's a very important decision. And so I work and have been involved in that for good 15, 16 years. And so I'm here tonight to talk about that and give you my experience and any advice that may be useful to you, I hope.
Thank you ever so much for that introduction. So without further ado, we'll move on to our 15-minute presentations approximately for each of our panelists. So Vinesh, if you'd like to go first, I'm happy to hand over.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Katie. This applies certainly to Rob and Lawrence. If at any point you wish to jump in and either say what I'm saying is complete and utter rubbish, or if there's something you'd like to add on to it, please, by all means, do feel free. It is an incredibly daunting process applying for pupillage and going through the application process itself. It's incredibly nerve-wracking, especially when you've yet to file or make an application. And it's incredibly daunting when you have your first round interview. It then gets even worse when you have your first second round interview, and then it's unbearable when you are waiting for pupillage portal gateway to then tell you whether or not you've been offered a place, or whether you are reserve listed, or whether you are first reserve, second reserve, or whatever the case may be. So unfortunately, the process doesn't get any easier the further along it you go. But in fact, it does, however, become more inspiring, simply because you are getting through and certainly over those hurdles which a lot of people will fall at. So for me, I've got about 5 top tips which I wish that everyone this afternoon takes away with them. And the first one is that treat your applications like a system, treat it like a process. Have, for example, a spreadsheet which details the deadline for every single set you wish to apply to. Make sure that spreadsheet contains every single document required in respect of that application. Some might, for example, be through the portal process, the gateway process. Others might, for example, require a CV and covering letter. Some might even just require a CV. Knowing the differences between the different systems is incredibly important, because it's going to look incredibly embarrassing if you apply to a CV with you apply to a set of chambers with a CV and covering letter, but when they also require, for example, a piece of written work. Your application will just not be considered if you fail to meet the technical requirements of the same. So please do have a system in process, an Excel spreadsheet that allows you to check exactly what you need to do and have a little checklist to make sure that you've done it. When I was applying for pupillage, I perhaps took this slightly too far, because I had all my sets, all their deadlines all listed, and then I used to have a little color block chart type thing, which would tell me how far I am through a particular application in its own right. So have I reached the experiences section? Have I completed the education section? And then I'd have a different color to say, right, okay, I'm now waiting for this particular set to tell me whether or not I've got a first round interview. I'm waiting for this particular set to tell me whether or not I've got a second round interview. Perhaps that is going slightly on the far side, but to each their own. What it does do is that it does direct the mind to say that pupillage is about making sure you keep on top of, or pupillage applications is about making sure you keep on top of the process itself. So if you have some sort of document, some sort of cheat sheet, it will just make your life that bit easier, whilst the application process is inherently stressful. The second tip is please start early. There is no reason why you can't start at least thinking about your pupillage applications. Right now, I appreciate that the Gateway will have their vacancies, I think, towards the close of the year, with then the Gateway process then opening up in January. That doesn't mean that you have to start your pupillage applications in January itself. Everyone knows what the questions are. Everyone knows, certainly if you've been through the process a couple of times, what the boxes will tell you, to list your experiences, to list your education, all that kind of stuff. So there is simply no reason why you can't do those bits and pieces early. Treating it, for example, I have a number of friends, a number of colleagues who, despite my advice, will always treat it like an essay or an exam, where this is the deadline, give me a week, I'll get it all done. And fair enough, I think some people can work like that. Myself, not really. But the thing about pupillage applications is that it's not like an essay or an exam question where you simply just have to know the right answer and then recall the material in the application itself. It is essentially it's not a bad way to think about it. It is a body of art, effectively, because it takes time to finesse, it takes time to refine, and you're going to go over bits and pieces over and over and over again to make sure that you've expressed yourself in the best or clearest way possible, or that you've sold yourself to the highest of your ability. It is a sales document, and as such, a time should go in to making sure that the pitch is done correctly. So please do start early. My third tip, and this is a bugbear of mine, is do check spelling and grammar. And check it again and check it some more. To be fair, I'm a victim of this as well. So there have been plenty of times where I've gone through an application. I've submitted an application, be it through portal process or through CV and covering letter. I've then been invited to first round. I then reread my application, and then I find that it is littered with typos and grammar errors and the like. Avoid that like the plague if you possibly can. If you're preparing for an interview and you see all those little small errors, they do just knock you off your game. I appreciate that ultimately some people may not necessarily care if you've put the comma in the wrong place, or you've perhaps used a semicolon when a colon is perhaps more appropriate, those small errors. But there's no reason why your game should be put off simply because you've made a spelling mistake or a grammar mistake, which you could have rectified earlier. And so that does in fact feed in with my previous point on making sure you start early enough, so that you can have these checks and balances processes put in place to make sure that what you are producing is to the best of your ability. I actually once had, it's not necessarily a pupillage application, I think it was a mini pupillage application, where the applicant had misspelled DWF. I'm not quite sure how that's possible, because it's 3 letters and you say it in the order that it's written in. So I immediately looked down on that application for fairly obvious reasons. So please do check. My 4th point is that an application is a task of spin. You are trying to sell yourself in the best possible light using the pieces of evidence that you have at your disposal, whether that be your module marks at university, your degree classification, your mini pupillages, your other work experience, or your hobbies and interests. Those are just pieces of evidence. Your objective as an advocate in your application is to put the correct spin on it. And what this means is that you can turn anything around if you know, or if you think about it in the right way. So for example, I, for personal reasons, had to do the bar course part-time. I initially had applied to do it full-time. I was going to do it with my friends as well, but for circumstances that I didn't really need to go into, I had to drop down to the part-time course. And I was speaking to one of the tutors on the course, and statistically speaking, if you are on the part-time course, you are less likely to secure pupillage, simply because there might be reasons such as you are working to support yourself financially, which means you can't commit all the time you wish to your exams and your coursework, etc. Or it might be the fact that, again, tied to financial reasons, you don't have, or you need to fund yourself through the program itself because you don't have the benefit of a scholarship. But the mere fact that you are doing the bar part-time and working alongside it full-time is in and of itself nothing inherently wrong, as long as you've got the right spin on it. And the spin in this particular case is to say that, well, look, I am working full-time, I'm doing, whatever it might be, 40, 45 hours per week as a paralegal, and I'm also doing the bar part-time. I'm doing that at evenings and weekends. And what this means is that I have now learned, as opposed to learning or will hone or anything like that, how to balance my time effectively and how to balance competing priorities. Because inevitably, the situation is that you are you're very close to the end of the financial year, in which case then all billing, for example, must be done and ready to be sent off to the clients. In those sort of circumstances, then it's entirely appropriate for sometimes work to take priority over the bar course. And that might, for example, lead to a not as expected performance in an exam. But if you can say that as a result of this particular action, I can now balance all these different things and I can perform to a reasonable standard across the board, that is an incredibly powerful tool, or an incredibly powerful reason, certainly, to show that you are a very good candidate or a very credible candidate for pupillage. I think the further point that I would add is that it is inherent certainly in the practice of being a barrister, that you are balancing too many different things at any one time. And so if you can show that you've got these skills to, for example, organize and prioritize accordingly, then that's only going to work to your favor. I think that was point 4. Point 5 is be concise. When you print off the gateway form, it will be enormous, because there's like 10, 15 different questions on there, and undoubtedly you'll have a number of mini pupillages to talk about, a number of other work experiences to talk about, as well as the set questions on the application form. Less is most of the time more. And so be selective about which experiences you wish to put down on your application form. Mini pupilages and work experiences, I've always said, are like Pokemon cards. Ultimately, you're out to catch them all. But if you are facing a rock type Pokemon, you know that you need to use a water type Pokemon, as opposed to an electric type. And what this means for the bar is that if you are applying to a criminal set, then you might, for example, wish to lean more heavily on your criminal experiences and make a smaller reference to your civil experiences. And that might be the better way to show your commitment to the criminal bar. The same works the other way around. If you're applying to a civil or commercial set, showing that you've got 1 or 2 criminal mini pupilages just to show the fact that you've experienced the area and you've dismissed it for whatever reason just strengthens your application. Whereas if you simply just stated all of your mini pupilages, then you'd come across, especially if you've got quite a wide variety, you come across to a reviewer as someone who is trying to effectively dip their toes into all sorts of different areas of law and may not necessarily be focused or committed to one particular area. So yes, be concise, be selective. And I think that concludes my 5 tips. And if there's anything else that anyone would to share or denounce, please do so.
Thank you for that. I think we'll Katie, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me? I think I'm having some issues.
Yeah.
So if we move on to Lawrence, is that okay for you to start your presentation? Or?
I'll tell you, rather than have the 2 barristers go side by side, I think let Robert go now, because he's got a very interesting take, and I think it fits in perfectly with what Vinesh has just said. It dovetails very, very well.
Perfect. Robert, are you all right with that?
Yeah, that's very kind of you, Lawrence. Thank you. I'm just going to drop my LinkedIn link into the chat, so if anyone would like to connect with me, feel free to do so. Gabrielle, I did produce a mini sort of presentation. Is it okay if I just share that with your
Yes, you should be able to share.
So if this is where technology sometimes is on my side. Let me just see if this works.
Perfect. I can see that.
Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to, as Lawrence very kindly mentioned, I'm going to approach this slightly differently in terms of people perhaps looking to aspire to get into the legal sector, be that more from a sort of lawyer perspective or potentially barristers. We support a number of law firms with lots of interesting career moves, and we're actually seeing quite a large trend of particularly boutique law firms in London looking to bring in barristers and that sort of skill set. So I'm just going to give some very high level tips and things that I think people should be thinking about where there's some nice synergies. And I'll just echo everything Vinesh said. I think he hit a number of the key points that you have to think about, particularly around organisation, attention to detail, and all of those extra points. So the first point I would say is we are in a content-fueled society at the moment. There's really no excuse for laziness. There's so much legal content available to people to do as much sort of research and get yourself up to standards. So you can utilize podcasts, not just our own, the Legally Speaking podcast, but there's lots of really good podcasts donated to the legal space out there. Listen to them. There's going to be nuggets of wisdom. There's going to be speakers on there that can really give you advice, careers advice. And what's more, you can then reach out to those prospects as well to build your networks who potentially help you. commercial news. There's so many good resources around there. We have our own The Legal Brief, but there's the Business Update, there's the Legal Update, there's lots of groups, societies, there's the Global Lawyers Connect, which is a really good looking at things from an international perspective that helps people trying to navigate careers internationally. So London Young Lawyers Group, and I can go on and on and on. But the first tip is really consume that legal content to understand the industry more, and make sure you're really, really well read and understand what you're getting yourself into. Because then, once you understand what you're getting into, you can tailor your applications. So how do you do that? You need to make your application stand out. So each and every application you do has to be tailored, particularly to, if you're applying to a law firm, you can't cut corners, unfortunately. Copying and paste does not work. You have to really do your research. Maybe that means actually going above and beyond to speak to people maybe in the position you're interested in, people who have passed an application that you're trying to do currently, and perhaps even, you know, mentioning in the application relevant names, information, things that you've researched about the firm in particular, to really flex your muscles in the fact that you really have done your DD. Get them biting in your application. You know, don't give absolutely everything away. Give them, you know, enough to get them biting and really interested in you, because that's the key with all of this. Get them interested in you so they should want to invite you in. So give them enough to get them biting, and hopefully that will then be reflected in them wanting to invite you in. Show how you have gained transferable skills. Lots of people daily ring me up saying, I don't have any of the skills that I want to be a lawyer, a barrister, X, Y, and Z. You know, well, you have to be creative. You have to think about how your certain transferable skills can actually be a benefit and add value, and give some real life examples and tangibles around that. So as I put on the last point there, demonstrate what value you could potentially bring to that law firm, and how the firm would benefit from you actually joining, because you're trying to make yourself stand out. So you have to show how you can be different. So that leads us on to sort of how to be different. And this is not an exhaustive list at all. This is just some headlines. So skills, learning a language. You know, we work with a lot of law firms, particularly who operate in the Middle East, Asia, Russia, Latin, whatever it might be. So, you know, if you are sort of basic Arabic, why don't you try and upskill yourself to getting to be fluent Arabic? If you are, you know, a sort of intermediate Spanish speaker and you're interested in sort of LATAM and you want to maybe move to a firm where you can get involved in complex cross-border type work, then of course having that language skill is going to help you. Portuguese and Russian are other couple of languages we've seen a large sort of demand in recently in the legal industry. We can't deny the fact that we're in a techie world now. I used to be a technophobe. Now I love all things tech. So coding, you know, having an appreciation for the fact that that will be some part of your role if you were to move into a law firm at some stage in your career, having an appreciation for that. Speed reading, learning about branding and marketing. You know, nowadays, and I get really excited, I see a lot more legal professionals embracing themselves on platforms like LinkedIn. And ultimately what they're doing is raising their profile. And that's only going to help you in terms of if you're pitching for business in the future or trying to stand out, or equally just growing your network. Personal development, you know, you have to have self-confidence, self-belief, and have a mindset that you are going to be successful in your application. You're going to have so many knockbacks, and that's just all part of the process. So you kind of just have to be aware that that's just all part of your journey. So some other ideas, as I've mentioned, creating an online presence, you know, through LinkedIn, Instagram, other forums, whatever it might be. Attend, you know, online, offline events, you know, actually network. You know, there's people like myself on this webinar this evening. I'm happy if you want to reach out to me to get some follow-up tips or some extra, you know, go that extra mile to be proactive, to get people who can help you. You know, if you're involved or wish to get involved in diversity and inclusion initiatives, you know, that's something the legal sector is still so far behind. So, you know, if that's something you're passionate about or you want to get involved in, or if you can add value about in this sort of topic, then, you know, make sure you're putting that in your application, or other sort of, if you've been doing some mentoring or whatever you've been doing that kind of makes you stand out, I would put in there. And as I mentioned, showcasing your thirst for sort of legal tech would be really, really important. and show what you're doing. You know, if you are, you know, dedicated to listening to podcasts, or if you're interested in X, you're interested in Y, all these things also make you relatable and human. Okay, that's the other thing that I would really encourage you to do, because everyone typically, by and large, has quite a good academic. They have quite a good of all of the basic things. You've got to think a little bit differently to how am I going to stand out. And again, looking at this from more of a sort of lawyer perspective, I think a lot of people will be aware now of the O-shaped lawyer. So open, opportunistic, original, taking ownership. You have to be able to showcase that skill set, or that willing to be an O-shaped lawyer. Some other sort of, I guess, harsh truths. Be realistic. You know, sometimes you've just got to be realistic with what's achievable. You know, a career is a very long time, and you want to do something you're going to enjoy, you're going to be passionate about. So think about potential firms. Once you've done your research, or you've really researched into a particular thing, really think about whether or not, do you know what, that's going to be right for me, or it could help me with the next move. I always say your career is like building blocks now. The application is one building block. Then you make your first career move, and you're inevitably trying to build your building blocks to create your own journey, your own success. But if you have visions of trying to get into the end goal straight away, you may have to take a couple of steps before that. And that's completely fine, because what you're doing is adding your value. You're increasing your market value. You're actually going out and creating what I call those building blocks. And as I've labored the point there, rejection is just failing forward. You know, learn from the rejections and just move forward. Use every experience, be it a positive or a negative one, as an opportunity to maybe build out those networks with people who could maybe help you in the future. But there would just be some of the things I would say that would perhaps help you stand out from an application perspective. So thank you very much.
Thank you again for that, Robert. If you don't mind stopping sharing your screen, if you can figure that out. Perfect. Fab, that was amazing. Lawrence, do you mind going next?
No, that's me now. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm unmuted. Great. Okay, right. I'm going to bring something different to the party this evening so that you get another view. Vinesh has very helpfully told you what the position is with the bar. I do urge you just to remember some of the key things he said about preparation, about having that database, really approaching this very, very professionally. That's a foundation, even before you get to what has been set out as tonight's discussion, which is how to stand out. The prerequisite to that is, well, how do I even get there? And Vinesh gave you very helpful foundations, as did Robert with his slides, about the preparatory work that needs to be undertaken, be organized, have a proper database, think about who you're applying to, etc. All of those are necessary foundations to get to the position where you're ready to prepare your application. But at that point, what I'm going to do is stick to the brief tonight. And the brief is how to stand out. And when I was asked to speak tonight, and I thought about the subject for some time, as someone who actually recruits and has recruited people into very successful careers, I decided I needed to sit down with a cold flannel, and it had nothing to do with the weather, and rid myself of all the bad applications I've seen, and weep internally, weep visibly, weep so that the neighbors wanted me to be sectioned. Over the years, I kid you not, it has been so painful, because you pick up this piece of paper like this and it comes in, and it's someone's dreams. Someone spent years from school, the effort they put in, the work, the sacrifice, the money mums and dads put in. It's dreams, it's dreams and aspirations. And when it gets to us, what I'd like you to know is how to stand out. Well, First, think about who's going to read what you've written and what they want to read, and think how important it is that you make sure that what you settle in that document, whether electronic or paper, is irrelevant, is a true reflection about you and what you've achieved and what you put forward. Because this is your big shot. Virtually every job still requires a paper application before you get to sit down for the interview. So it's so critical that you think about that. And as I said, in conclusion, sharing my experience, I've seen thousands upon thousands of applications to become a barrister. And I can honestly, hand on heart, say about 80% of those just simply are not a good representation, because people haven't taken it seriously. People haven't done what Vinesh and Robert have both advised you tonight, which is think about the preparatory stages. Think about how you prepare that. And absolutely right, Vinesh, it's not a bugbear, it's solid. Think about your grammar. If you're going to be representing other people and it is a command of oral advocacy and written advocacy, well, the bare bones, the tools of your trade are punctuation and grammar. You know, these things you're going to have to know and present, because when people read you, they'll be looking at that as a way to judge you. So if you can't get that right in an application, it's not going to reflect very well on all that effort you put in for all of your studies. And I would take it another level as well, which is when you are preparing and thinking, how do I stand out? Understand that you stand out because on the whole, you're different. There used to be an expression that was a very popular one, says everything's vanilla, you know, it's out of the box, it's vanilla. You've got to come out of the box and be different, and out of your box and put yourself on your application so you stand out, that you recall or you remember after this that this is a period of investment that you're going to have to give. It's not like before, one exam, age determinative to another exam. Here you have to think much more longer term, and that's never been more true than it is now. So you've heard, again, the other members of the panel mention these points tonight, but you're looking at things such as, how do I be different? How do I stand out? Well, I'm going to mentor. I'm going to be a mentee. So you can mentor students at schools, and you can be a mentee with schemes with law firms, with charities, etc. You can become a sponsor, you can become a spondee at any stage. Just look these things up. They're going to add factors that universities by themselves, with the degrees they provide you, and BPTC cannot provide. So you are building more into your application that break you away from the convention in a good way and make you stand out, because you were the one who put in that extra mile, and therefore you will reap what you sow when it comes down to someone reading the application, particularly if someone who reads it did what you're doing. Now you start to get connections, and they'll say, I remember when I was that age, I gave up time to do X, Y, and Z. I didn't sit down for Netflix, etc. I went out and I put in extra hours pro bono. I worked in a nursing home. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be specifically dovetailed to what you're going to do for the next 40 years, but it does show a will and a commitment to move outside your normal environment, so you're standing out in your personal life, and that will make you stand out in your application. So build an application by investing years before you make one. And if you haven't started yet, do so. It's never too late. Look for things to do. I also thought, well, one thing that you need to be thinking about is the depth of what you've got involved. And this overlaps what I've just said. Look at layering up on different things. If you do one thing, think about whether you can go off and do it at the next level with volunteering, for example, caring, with maybe working in a law center, Citizens Advice Bureau. You know, they'll have programs within there that you can then gain, additional learning and additional things, again, that put into your application will make you stand out. Another thing that makes you stand out with all that competition that's out there is how much interest and therefore investment have you put into the future methods of transacting legal services, working in jobs. Robert called it transferable skills. I get those, that expression. And I use an expression which is similar on nearly all points, which is soft skills. You'll not be taught these at university, but they'll really make you stand out in your cover letter, not necessarily in the CV or the form you fill in, as Vinesh said, in a portal, but wherever you get to do that little bit and speak about yourself. If you have a section that says, oh, by the way, I'm tech savvy, IT savvy, you will immediately appeal to a lot of employers who are 20, 25 years older than you, who didn't grow up with the internet per se. They grew up with CFAX. Yeah, run that by them. CEEFAX and teletext for those who remember. Yeah, scare your grandparents. So when they're now in these positions of recruitment, what they're looking for again is someone who stands out, is someone who adds value to their skill set, not just with, well, I got a first and the road ended there for me, I've proved everything I need to be, but someone who says, well, actually, I then learn, as Robert discussed, coding. I mean, have a look at Bootstrap, for example. You can go back to machine code, BASIC, Pascal, Fortran, Turbo C, Turbo C++. These are all different things in coding you can learn, but you can also just keep it softer. You can learn to do things in HTML, for example, Drupal. There are many things, just pick one or two, and you don't need to become a master, but and that's why they're soft skills, but you will be so much more versatile when an employer is looking at who they have, because they will think, well, this person has further talents. Yes, they've got their degree. We all got our degree. But what else do they do? What else did they do to make themselves stand out? What was the extra activity, the extra mile they went? And you know the stories of success. You've seen the documentaries of sports people and other people who are competing. Invariably, success isn't just this intrinsic greatness. It is those who go the extra mile, who say, even though I've run and I'm tired, I'll run again. And even though we're mentally tired or fatigued or bored, we go again. You pick yourself up. And the more you do it, the more you develop, the more you assist yourself, the more the brain strengthens. And as you add the things that I've discussed and the other members of the panel tonight, you will grow yourself. And you will therefore be able to transport that knowledge of your wisdom and skill set onto your application. And that will make you stand out as well. Because the final point I'll make is the shortest point. It's be yourself in balance. When you draft these things, these letters, these applications, however they may form, don't copy yourself all the time. You're changing. Even in a day, you'll change. Look who will be reading it, as I said earlier, what they want to hear. Be realistic. Again, on Robert's slides, I could see that he was referring to grades and pick yourself at the right point. Yeah, I did read them, Robert. And be yourself in balance. So don't come at it panic. Don't come at it desperate, because I've read so many applications that come across that way. And I know why. People are nervous, they're worried, but that will seep through the application. And you have to start to grow with yourself. And as you learn these other things, self-improvement, you'll quietly improve, you'll quietly get more confidence, and therefore be in balance with yourself, with the balance of what you'll achieve. Robert used the word of realism, what can be done, the more you'll need to invest if you get rejections, how to develop from that, because that will happen, it happens to us all. But ultimately, when you do that drafting, just do it with balance, so it just reads well and you're satisfied that, you know, yes, there may have been difficulties in your life, if there are for many people, but you are trying to pitch yourself right now as an employer. And again, one of the qualities that all employers are looking for are people who are going to come in and fit into the organization and work with them, work with the common themes, work with their expectations, and, you know, pool your energy, your resources together. So do the same when you're drafting. Balance up what you're doing and always try and therefore give the best presentation of yourself. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lawrence. That was extremely interesting and very touching and heartfelt at the same time. So now we'll go on to the pre-asked questions, onto the sign-up form. Obviously, and sadly, we cannot cover every single question. However, me and Katie did pick out a few that we believe are key to this session. So I'll begin with the first question, and whichever panelist would like to input or answer the question, you are more than welcome to. So the first question is, what is the best way to identify what makes you different and use it to your advantage in an application?
I think if I can make some introductory remarks on that. Despite the fact that everyone has a degree and everyone's done mini pupilages and everyone's done some form of Saturday job or whatever, the totality of your experiences is entirely unique. There is no one else on the planet who has done a degree from your university, who has gone in particular classification, who has also done mini pupilages at X, Y, and Z, and has also done work experiences with these people. So the sum of all the parts is what creates the individuality. So on top of that, if you can show what you have learned out of each experience, then you've taken your profile and you've actually made it individual. So you can say, I had this work experience at a nursing home. I learned about emotional intelligence and dealing with people for whom English might be first language, or who have special needs, or that might be whatever might be the case. That extra layer of saying I have learned this is in fact the uniqueness that you put in the application. So don't just say, oh, I've done this, this, and this. Take it the next step further, because that's how you show your individuality. But you can also show your individuality or stand out by simply developing more on your hobbies and interests. I've got a friend of mine who has recently taken up stand-up comedy. And unfortunately, whilst everyone can't do stuff like that for whatever reason, what you can do is say, well, look, I have a hobby in X, and as from X, I have learned about Y. And again, that's putting your own unique spin on it. Your hobby could be could be something along the lines of saying, I play five-a-side football on a Sunday morning. In which case, then, if you say something about, well, I have learned about camaraderie, I've learned about being responsible for one's own actions, but also playing as part of a bigger team, then you're adding more individuality to your application. So it's about taking your experiences and working out really what you've learned from it as a person and putting that into your application. I think that goes some way to show yourself as a unique individual.
Thank you for that. Does anybody?
Sorry, my screen's crackling. I can hear myself. Unless anyone's got anything to add, I'll move on to the next question.
Can I just add this really, really quickly? Vinesh hit on a very good point as well in that, which is when you put that document together and about your work history, one of the things you can leave quite comfortably is when you were 14 or 15 and worked in a coffee shop. Because I can assure you, use the space to build in new things, not things that you did many years ago, because those on any scale won't succeed. And so building the new that you're will put at the top, and things like that that you did as a teenager. They don't really, nothing really turns on that, and you're still relying on it.
I would just add on that. I completely agree with both Vinesh and Lawrence's points. Absolutely spot on. I think just one thing that I'm, as perhaps an employer or a business owner or as legal professionals, I think one skill that is invaluable is problem-solving skills. Throughout your entire legal career, there will be problems. People will come to you with their problems. You need to solve problems. So when you're thinking about an application, if you've spotted a potential problem or a gap or something that you think, actually, I can help with that, or I've got some expertise with that, then I'd really try and showcase that particular problem-solving skill set. So for me, for example, someone applied to my business because they said, your website's rubbish. You know, and not in so many words, but they said, I can get more inbound leads, I can do this, I can do that, I can do all these wonderful things. I thought, I have no idea about any of this. This is brilliant. You spotted a problem where I had a static website, which I thought looked amazing, but it was adding no value to me. So think about maybe spotting a potential problem, something a bit entrepreneurial, something that you feel you can really hammer home, and that again may help you stand out.
Thank you for that, both of you. The next question is, what is one thing that you were criticised for on a pupillage application? So.
Let me jump in first. My CV said I was interested in port, and the panel got confused at one of the paper buildings and thought I was talking about shipping ports, when actually I was talking about port, tawny, ruby, vintage. And so we had this very strange moment at the end, and there were a couple of people who didn't like, and they were quite critical, which is, well, you didn't make yourself very clear. I mean, I thought it was hilarious. But the train spotters amongst the interview panel were actually thinking I was maybe talking about Dover or Calais or Singapore or something like that, rather than alcohol. But anyway, and that's it. So if there's a danger that something can be read both ways, I'd never thought about that. I thought I was just being light-hearted at the end of an application, but it sort of backfired. So watch for that.
That's brilliant.
I think I've had a fairly similar experience, though. I was talking about bikes, and then I've got an interest in push bikes. I've made a few and all that kind of stuff, and put it down in my application. And then I had an entire discussion with the panel simply about the brakes on a particular bike, and I think it got to the point where they were so far gone with discussing about bike brakes that they just sort of left it there, and we parted ways amicably. So it is, I think, sometimes even over egging your interests and hobbies might push the panel the other way.
Thank you for that. Anything else to add?
I think they're both very, very valid points. I think, you know, just talking more generally, I think, you know, just don't be generic. I think it's a general point about this. You know, you need to make sure that it's crafted, it's tailored, and just refuse to make yourself sound generic. So, you know, it touches on sort of the other points that Vinesh and Lawrence were making, but it's, if you treat this as just, you know, it is a process, but you've got to invest 110% into every process that you go into. So yeah, refuse to be generic is probably one of the things I would say.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Well, I'll move on to the next question. So the next one is, how can I write a good application for a mini pupillage without already having obtained a previous mini pupillage?
Include cash. No, postal order. Sorry, cash is bad these days. Oddly enough, chambers get applications even in the current times, a few a week. I'm very proud to say that last year, in 52 weeks, we had 43 mini pupils. and each one had unique training and was able to access the RCJ, the Rolls Building, Court of Appeal, Old Bailey. If you're down here, you may as well go and see that too for half a day. It's that old chicken and egg, isn't it? How do you get it if you haven't got it? I think it's about your cover letter. I've heard Robert speak about this before very passionately and very accurately and very focused. And I'll try and distill, if I still remember what he told me and I was trying to scribble down in case I have to apply for something one day, like a pension. And what actually happened is Robert saying, look, focus on what you're doing and tell them you've not had a mini pupillage. Be honest and say, look, I'd like a mini pupillage. I appreciate I may not have had one before, but I've spent the time, I've looked up chambers, I've seen so-and-so's here and so-and-so, I've seen you've got these memorable cases in the last 6 months and cite them accurately. I can see the work is X and Y, I'd like to come and see that. I see you practice in the following courts. I'd like to be able to attend if I may. So you've got the courtesy, the diplomacy, the detail, the accuracy, and that's the best you can do. To be honest, that's the best you can do in the one-page cover letter. And fingers crossed that whoever reads that particular application, that's made it stand out, that they think this is someone who genuinely wants to be here in my set of chambers. This isn't a generic letter. This is specific, very bespoke. And I think that, whether it's for the first time or any time, but particularly for when it's the first time, to say, this is my first mini pupillage and I'd like it to be with you.
Thank you. Has any of the panelists got anything else?
I'd like to just spin off of what Lawrence has said very briefly. It took me about 10 goes, I think, before I got my first mini pupillage. How I then defected, or how it remedied the defect, was simply having someone look at my covering letter, look at my CV, so it's simple as making sure someone reviews your application before it goes out. But the second point is that an application pupillage, you aren't necessarily trying to sell your skills and ability. You are, I would say, more looking like you're trying to demonstrate your eagerness to learn, your eagerness to develop, and your eagerness to see what Chambers does. So if you make sure that your application focuses on that side of the equation, then you can't really go too far wrong. No one can criticize you for not having work experience already, particularly if you are just in your undergrad, because a number of places won't accept applicants who are either undergraduate or at stages of their academic training. So no one really can criticize you for that, but what they can criticize you for is saying, if your application doesn't show that you want to learn about what they do. And that's simply what a mini pupillage is about.
That's brilliant. Thank you for that. The next question, is it compulsory to have past legal experience? Most experience has been virtual lately due to the pandemic, so how could we use our virtual experiences to stand out on applications?
I think all experience is experience, regardless of whether it's in person or whether it's virtual. I've had to conduct a number of hearings over Skype and Zoom and all the rest of it. And so, in fact, being tech savvy, knowing how to operate these particular pieces of software, anything is good experience, really.
I would just build on that, as Vinesh very kindly put. Experience is experience, but what have actually been some of the enhanced benefits? I guess enhanced benefits of actually that virtual experience, that, you know, maybe it's given you more time to attend more you know, online internships, whatever it may be. You've been cutting down your travel time, you've been cutting down whatever, or what you've actually been learning, because they've been able to group together more people on panels. So you've been learning from extra people because they haven't had to try and get them into 6 rooms. So you've been learning and sort of learning by osmosis by so many other people. So try and pick the positives or the additional add-ons that you've actually got that maybe a face-to-face experience may not be able to give you, to try and again make yourself stand out, be a bit different and think creatively.
Yeah, can I add to that just give Gabrielle and Katie a hard time to do more of what they do. Don't let them sit on their laurels and get lazy and take summer holidays, because the schools may go back on the 1st of September, universities aren't, a lot of workplaces won't. And let's be honest, because I have to look at this as someone who runs a business, so I have to think about COVID safe, COVID secure, who commutes, who doesn't commute, clients in, clients out. And the reality is, with the world as it is, with the danger that there's going to be, autumn coming and more sickness, what we do virtually is going to become incredibly important. And as I said in my answer earlier, we get a lot of applications, and we're just saying to all of those candidates now that we're going to build a virtual program. So write to people you want to go to and actually suggest it to them. A lot of people won't have thought about it, whether they be firms or chambers, and just say, look, can you put together a virtual program? And even if you had some ideas, I'm sure a few people would engage and latch into that, and it puts you in pole position. And then, as I said, pressurize Gabrielle and Katie to do more of these things, where you get the likes of a Vinesh and a Robert and myself come along, hopefully, of some service and interest to you all, and imparting some knowledge. But you too can put that onto your applications and say CVs to say, look, I may have been stuck at home, but rather than watch Emmerdale, I spent my 5:30 to 6:30 on this webcast about the following, and I learned about X, Y, and Z. And that can only be positive, not negative, that you're using your time. So the more material there is that you can be learning in the digital environment, please engage with that as well and pass that on to your put that onto your applications.
Thank you for that, Lawrence. Just to add, and I'm by no means an expert, but if you are including it in your applications, don't just say you've done a legal cheek internship. Thousands of people did that legal cheek internship. At least develop on your skills and add something to it, because I don't think anyone's surprised that quite a lot of people have done it. So let's go into the next question.
Just to build on that point, Gabby, that's a really good point, actually. Definitely you need to elaborate on that, but if you can produce content about actually what you've learned from that experience and make yourself stand out and maybe document that and actually give something to the system, maybe that particular chambers or that partner you're connected with or that barrister you're connected with might start to notice you, like, oh, okay, that's quite different. And then you can engage and build your networks online. So I think, if you're getting these virtual experiences, package them up, sell them as yours in a way that makes you stand out and engage with people, because again, you're just doing something slightly different.
Thank you for that, Robert. Right, so the next question is how to make my written answers sound more punchy and commercial or commercially relevant rather than just a piece of academic work. Robert's got a grin.
I would probably go last in answering this, just because I would probably approach it very slightly differently. So I'll be keen to hear what sort of Vinesh and Lawrence says.
Lauren?
I was going to say...
Go for it, Vinesh.
Please. Oh, thank you, Lawrence. I was just going to say I loathe the term commercial awareness. I absolutely hate it. It's not a thing. Let's not try and make it a thing. I mean, in terms of making your response, I suppose, punchy, less is more. Be concise. If you can make the same point in fewer words, make it in fewer words. If you give your marker less to read, they'll appreciate you for it, and your argument will come across stronger. But in terms of being more commercial, it's kind of hard to do in an application. What I would say is perhaps if you are, for example, writing an opinion or some sort of response which is akin to an opinion, think about who you're writing it for in terms of the client. Think about what kind of industry they operate in, think about what kind of challenges those industries are facing at the time of writing the opinion, certainly at the time of writing it in days like these. And then just show that you have an awareness of the potential ramifications of a particular order or a particular outcome that it might have on the business and on the industry at large. For example, road traffic accident judgments can have a very, very big impact on the insurance industry. So, for example, a finding by a high court or circuit level judge on the recoverability of a particular head of loss following a road traffic accident could cost the insurance industry millions in a year. And so if you just have that sort of thinking in the back of your head, that who am I writing this for? What practical consequences are going to have for them down the line? Then you've kind of ticked the commercial awareness box without it actually being a box, because it's not a thing.
I'm going to skip this one and just go over to Robert, because I think this is going to be an interesting juxtaposition.
Well, I really agree with what you said there, Vinesh. I really have a bugbear about this commercial awareness thing. I really do. I think show it, write something that's valuable. Do not write something unless you really, truly believe, ultimately someone's giving you something at the end of the day. It might be a job, it might be experience, it's something. They're investing in you. So if you're writing something fluffy or just generic and it's about, oh, I'm good, I know my commercial, no one cares. I'm very passionate about that. I want people who can get to the point with facts. So the XYZ analysis, I did X, which led to Y, which can lead to Z. That is just spot on. So, but read it back and think, actually, if I was hiring for myself, I'm reading this now. Is that good enough? Is that valuable enough? And is that to the point enough to really make myself stand out? If you read the Financial Times, brilliant. But again, how is that valuable? What have you been learning? What trends have you spotted that's actually going to be of interest that can make yourself stand out? So yeah, commercial awareness, it's great and we promote it and there's loads of resources out there, but don't even need to mention that. You need to showcase that by actually evidencing it. I think Vinesh gave a cracking example there of how you could do that.
Brilliant. So I'll move on to the next question. We might have touched on this a bit, but it links back to the transferability. How can we use non-law experience to showcase our unique skills? I don't know if anyone's got anything to just add in terms of that.
I'll take that in short. I did a lot of work in and around football, and because it was in my blood, I was a Leeds fan, say no more, and I worked for Norwich City, and that was at the height of a lot of bad times in football. So it was non-legal experience, but what it meant, I worked with the club. We had a scheme called SAFE, with the acronym stood for Soccer as Family Entertainment. And we bussed in coaches of kids from different parts of Norfolk for games at Carrow Road. And I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot about, managing that, working with the club. I was an official at the club. I had access to all areas and all players at all levels at all the time. Even during match day, I could walk across around the pitch. And I was 16, 17 years old. But it was all non-legal experience, but it was something which, I could develop and use in applications for other jobs, because it was something that was quite unusual. And didn't really have any grounding in law. It was all about sport and dealing with the issues that would occur in that scheme, and occur with respect to protecting children, if you like, from football violence, things like that. But it was a terrific experience for 3 years of my life. It gave me a boost to make applications in or around my early 20s, which included that experience. So non-law experience you can showcase if you have it, and it certainly can be relevant.
I'll just add to that, there's, we were talking about it earlier, and Lawrence mentioned sort of soft skills, transferable skills. You know, box clever is what I like to say. You know, if you've been in a debating team and you've won a debate or whatever it might be, you know, that's a good skill set that could potentially transfer. If you've done lots of presenting, you know, you've been very good at presenting, or you've done a lot of sort of oral speaking in sort of conferences or whatever it might be, you know, stuff that you're going to have to do in the role. Showcase how that could transfer very nicely, or where you know, you wouldn't be daunted by, say, client problems. If you've been you've been working on cold calling or in a sales center or whatever it might be, and you've had to handle complaints or people not being happy, there's lots of things from your experience that's not directly related to law, but are things you're probably going to have to handle when you're in the role. So there's lots of things. Again, just take a step back and think, how can I sell this nicely that's going to link it all together.
Thank you for that, Robert. And Vinesh, have you got anything to add?
Yes, if I could just add very briefly, what worked really well for me when I was putting my applications together is that I would do a mind map, and in the center of that mind map, I would have what is the name of the overall experience. So, for example, during my A-levels, I worked at JD Sports, so I'd have JD Sports in the middle of my page, and then around that, I'd have the next layer, which is every single activity I did as part of my job, whether it would be selling shoes, doing delivery, or it would be maintaining shop floor standards. And then the next layer on top of that, I would say what each particular task required of my skill set. So, for example, with delivery, it would be attention to detail for the delivery notes. It would be working efficiently in order to get the delivery out on time. And then if you keep building out like that, you will find that the end skill off of an activity directly links to a skill associated with being a barrister if you just let it grow laterally. And that worked out really well for me. So I thought I'd share that.
Thank you for that. So we'll move on to my final question, and I know Katie's got one last question for you all. So if anyone's got any additional questions, feel free to add them into the chat box for the last 15 minutes. So the final one from me is, how can I portray an interest in the legal sector without seeming like an inflexible candidate? Oh, there's a lot of thinking going on.
Can I have the question in plain English?
I don't know if I could help you with that. Sorry, Laura.
It was an inflexible question.
I think that they want to be really, really focused and want to come across like they have nothing else in their lives and they are all law-based. You know, this is everything. But then that they're not flexible to anything else too. I think, does that make sense? They're not
going to book into Waco, for those who know the reference. Look, let me just answer it shortly like this. Certainly in what I answered, the final point that I said in my 15 minutes was this: be you, but be you in balance. And if there's an extremity, which is I've really gone for this, but I'm not inflexible, I'm prepared to talk about other subjects, but I am law, then you've got to bring balance into your psyche and what you're doing. And by the things that Vinesh and Robert have done, bring in other interests. So there's certainly no harm in me. I'm straight law the whole way through. Everything I did at each university I went to was law. But you know, there were other things I did outside my studies and outside work experience that were non-legal, so that I wouldn't appear on paper to just be a one-trick pony. You don't want that impression on paper, because you will not stand out in your application. People will just think you're too narrow, particularly in the world we live in today. So yeah, there is a danger you could look inflexible because you are that one-trick pony, but you've got to bring other attributes. And if you don't have them now, go away and get involved in the right organizations and then write about them in your application and CV. Thanks.
Don't know if anyone's got anything to add.
I completely endorse what Lawrence has said. I think there is simply no need to show that law is the be all and end all of your life, and that shouldn't be it by any stretch of the imagination. And someone marking your pupillage application script will want to see balance to your life, really. So fine, fair enough, if you have, you know, an absolute burning passion for law, great, brilliant stuff, but you can just offset it by saying, well, this is what I do when I'm not thinking about law, which, you know, has to be at some point during the day. So even if it's an interest, even if it's an interest such as I enjoy reading books or something like that.
Yeah, I remember books.
Something. Yeah.
I completely,
law books.
I completely agree with Vinesh and Lawrence. And one of the things I said in my presentation was about being human and relatable. You know, that needs to come across. And I also talked about the sort of O-shaped law in terms of open, you know, that opportunistic, original, taking ownership. So I think if you can really try and showcase those, it'll make you stand out. But there's no wrong in following your passion. If you're passionate about the law, you should definitely, you know, communicate that very clearly. But all the other things, again, just in terms of that openness, you need to kind of tie in.
That's really brilliant. Thank you all. My final question: what skills do you believe law students must adopt, in order to stay competitive, especially now due to the issues brought by COVID?
I think a soft skill you need to have is resilience. You know, you know, at the moment, there's going to be a lot of law students who are not going to their first, second, seventh, 10th round are going to get what they want. So I think you really do need to look after your own mental health and accept that this is a process and a journey. So I'm looking at this very much just in just being honest. Not everyone is going to get what they want first time around. So you need to really practice that resilient skill set, because you're going to get knockbacks throughout your, not just application, but during your career and whatever it might be. So yeah, wherever you can, try and build up as much of your resilient skill set, because you need that. It's truly invaluable to keep you going.
I think on top of that, what I would add is being able to work from home, which I have learned over the last couple of months is a skill in of itself. There are so many distractions. My Xbox is downstairs, it's waiting for me. I'm eager, I'm itching, ready to go. But no, I've got to crack on with this piece of prep because I've got a trial tomorrow, whatever the case might be. So it is the soft skills, and I think it's also the ability to work from home, and then also the tech skills. But we're in a day and age where if you are of a certain age, it's pretty much assumed that you will have the relevant technological capability. So just keep on top of stuff like that.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the Xbox that got me there, Vinesh. It's the fact that you've got stairs. I'd just be up and down them all day. You know, wow, what a treat. I remember stairs. Anyway, I think resilience is a very, very good thing to say. And this is where I'm going to come at it, as looking at expansion of the business. So I was in aviation talking to some of the multinationals recently. Boeing are having a hard time. They're good friends of ours. Airbus are. And when you hear the stories and you also hear of the companies that have failed and are failing, and then you bring it home to law, you start to think, yes, we've got to start to anticipate how's this going to affect the market for new entrants coming in, entrants that I'm very interested in trying to recruit. And I think you have to be resilient in these times. There will be a downturn in employment at law. We've just got to accept that, and you've got to bed in for a little bit longer. But don't be negative, be positive about that, please, because what I hope you do is take away the advice that you receive from a webinar like this and say, well, maybe I haven't done this before, this idea of learning some coding, learning some skills, transferable or soft or otherwise. And now naturally, because of other things on the planet that are going on and outside all of our control, it suddenly gives you an extension of time, a legitimate one, because any employer 2 years down the road will fully understand. They won't say you were treading water. So take it, see this time as a period of opportunity. See it as a time that it may not come today, that there are going to be fewer jobs, there are going to be more rejections, But that opportunity gives you some time that you can go and build on your applications so that you've got some standout points. And look after yourselves as well. As Robert says, you know, it gets tough sometimes. And it's not going to get any easier now, but that is the new reality, and it's the new reality for jobs as well, I'm sad to say. But if you keep yourself engaged, active, and have that plan, you know, from all the different bits and pieces you've picked up tonight, and then execute that plan and give it momentum and give yourself a roadmap to all your applications for 2021 and also 2022.
Thank you for that, Lawrence. So obviously we have concluded with the pre-asked questions. I'm now going to open it up to everyone that's in the group. Obviously none had been asked in the chat. However, you are more than welcome to unmute your mic if you can't type the question quick enough. But I know it's completely scary, so I understand if not.
I guess I'll just add a point, Gabby, and I found this quite fascinating. Everyone talks about 5-year plans, and I saw an image yesterday of sort of, you know, everyone's 2015 plans for 2020, how are those looking? And that really resonated with me because, you know, and I think for lots of people listening, we're talking about resilience, knockbacks. It's important, even as panelists, and maybe I'm speaking on behalf of Vinesh and Lawrence and they can correct me, but we have our own challenges, problems, and, you know, things don't always go to plan. You know, that is just part and parcel of things. So don't just assume, oh, I was really impressed. Look, we're here because we genuinely, I believe, want to try and help you. So if you can be proactive, and, you know, I love that word Lawrence says, execute the plan, because that's exactly what you have to do. I see so many people on these webinars who then just don't really do anything. I think if you really bother to go the next step and execute the plan, then it will happen. But yeah, don't just sort of set yourself unrealistic things. But I'll be honest, my 2020 plan wasn't exactly how it was meant to be, was planned out in 2015. I've had to adapt, I've had to move, I've had to kind of make things happen, and I've had to be creative. But yeah, I just want to kind of make it clear that we all have our own challenges and problems, and it's completely fine.
Thank you for that, Robert. We have actually had a question in the chat which says, how do you show you have emotional intelligence in an application?
So you're asking a panel of boys about emotional intelligence. I love it. Okay. I think for me, again, it was that last point about what I made about be in balance. And a word Robert used, which was sort of be realistic. And Vinesh was talking about awareness. You know, these are things that you need to get across in your cover letter, in your application. And then that will show, it's not really an emotional, it's a maturity that you want to be showing, because maturity encompasses emotional intelligence as well as physical intelligence, the intelligence that you learn to interact and communicate with those people around you very sensibly. You're more tolerant, you're more understanding, you're more patient. And these are all the factors that bring you together, the yin and the yang, and if you like, of getting that balance right. So I wouldn't worry per se too much about, you know, is there this thing about emotional intelligence coming across in your application? I think if all of your application is balanced, it will show that, because it will be a very measured approach and a realistic approach, and one on a value system that values yourself and illustrates and reflects the value you bring into the organization that you want to employ you. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Lawrence. Vinesh, have you got anything else to add?
No, certainly from what Lawrence has said, I endorse everything.
Perfect. So we're coming to the end of the session. What I do like to do, and most of the panelists that are on here, well, all of the panelists will know this, I do like to do a virtual clap. I think it's very appreciated. So if everyone, well, obviously the people that don't have the cameras, but me and Katie will clap for you. So thank you again.
That's not virtual. That's just a clap on TV.
I still can't figure out how to do it on Zoom. I'm sure there's icons. Oh, look, it's getting better. Perfect. So, Katie, would you like to conclude?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you to each of our panelists again for joining us tonight. I know that throughout, Robert has given me the slides that he used when he did his presentation, so I'll make sure to circulate that with everyone who's attended tonight. This was the second webinar in our series, and our third one will be called Impressing an Interview, and we're hoping to do it next week at some time, but me and Gabrielle will arrange that, and of course, you know, publish it on LinkedIn, etc. So unless Gabrielle's got anything else to add, that's it from me. So thank you again.
Sorry to go back on concluding. However, there is a question in the chat, and I think it's quite useful for us to know. So the question is how to balance between the two aspects of being your true self at the same time as being what the recruiter wants to hear or wants you to be.
I would just say there's a fine line between arrogance and confidence, and there's also trade on facts. So, you know, ultimately, you know, if you're saying I'm the absolute best at this, that, and the other, then perhaps that's not the best way of phrasing that. If you were in the top 1% for X and that was a case of that, then I think trading on the actual facts rather than just sort of verbose language that may come across not as your true self is what I would suggest. But there's a fine line between arrogance and confidence. You really do have to obviously showcase your best self, but just trade on the absolute facts and really work around that.
Thank you, Robert. Has any of the panelists got anything else to add before we re-conclude? No? Okay, perfect. Right, so yeah, I'll re-conclude. Thank you again to all the panelists for joining and all the participants that have joined, especially on such a warm evening. I'm sure you could have thought of potentially not more educated things, but better things to do. Again, I'm sure, well, Robert and Lawrence have put in the chat their LinkedIn web links. I'm sure Vinesh is fine with you connecting in LinkedIn. Just let them know where you've seen them and potentially thank them for joining us. Again, if you enjoyed the session, please let us know and look out for the next session. Thank you again. Has any of the panelists got anything else to add before we conclude or leave?
Just briefly from me, thank you to those who gave up your time. Thanks to the panel who gave up their time and the organisers. I hope these things are helpful. I really do. You know, Robert said it true. We're running businesses, we're running our own lives, and we're dealing with those things. But we want to give the time to you as well in these forums that they're of true value, so that people who've lost work experience, lost chance to do schemes, lost chance to do marshalling, all these things that have vaporized in the last 5 months, that there is still an outlet that they can learn. There's still an outlet that they have something that they can hold on to and build with. So not everything is lost. And certainly I know, you know, the group that are before you all today believe in that very, very truly, that we give up our time because we really hope it's at least some way to fill the void that's been caused by COVID.
Thank you, Lawrence. Robert or Vinesh, have you got anything to add?
No, I just echo that, and I'd just like to say thanks to you, Gabrielle, and to Katie. I think, you know, taking the time to put these together, you know, it's a real pleasure to be on this, to be on the panel. So I'm grateful for you. And as I've just put in my note there, you know, you've all taken the time, you've invested time in yourselves. You owe it to yourselves now to really go away and kind of put those plans together. This is step one. And maybe it was a big step for you, sacrificing the time on a hot evening, and you have plans. Maybe you've given something up. Maybe you've not decided to go to X, Y, and Z. Good for you, because you're trying to put your career first. So this is just, I always talk about building blocks. The next step is actually put some of this into practice. You know, go over, look through your notes, follow up with the various people, and just go as part of your journey. But no, thank you everyone, and Vinesh, Lawrence, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think you guys are great. So yeah, really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Robert. And Vinesh?
Yes, thank you everyone for having me today, and thank you to Robert and Lawrence for incredible insight with their responses, as well as obviously Gabrielle and Katie. Thank you for putting these kind of events together. The bar especially, and I say this perhaps more so than other industries and other professions, is all about, oh, I think my computer has effectively died.
We can still hear you.
Ah, there we go. There we go. It's working now. Yes, so the bar especially is about helping out those who are starting from the bottom and working their way up through the profession. So you will always find people who are more than willing to read over applications and to give you help and pointers and guidance. The only thing that we ask is that you just ask for it. And it is the old saying, if you don't ask, you don't get. So if anyone wants to drop me a line with any questions, please do so.
Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I hope to see you all shortly. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.